What is up, Internet Basketball Junkies? Coach Hack here. I'm joined by two outstanding basketball coaches for a wide-ranging roundtable discussion today covering culture, leadership, player management, zone offense, baseline out-of-bounds ideas, offensive philosophy, and lessons from some great coaches. We'll break down some viral clips. We'll discuss how coaches balance standards with their star players, explore the evolution of an offensive movement against zone defense, and kind of debate the role and ritual of standards in program building. So joining me today is Coach Sime Fatovic and Coach Kramer. Guys, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us again here, Coach. Always good to talk a little hoops. We got a lot of different things we're going to talk about here today, so it's be interesting to see where it heads.
Yeah,
Coach,
appreciate it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
it's an honor, coaches, to be on with you. It's been, I really appreciate it, and I've been following Coach Matt for years.
Coach Tim, no pressure, but this is your inaugural appearance on the show. I'm looking forward to hearing your insights, but don't get intimidated by Coach Kramer since he's a veteran here. I look forward to hearing from both of you guys and getting a little bit different perspective. But, guys, I have a little bit of to open the show with here today. There's been a tragic incident here with one of my good friends, Coach Vince Hanna. So Vince was a former guest on the live stream here. He contributed to my Diamond Press Breakers Unlocked package that we put together. But beyond basketball, Coach Vince was a friend of mine. We talked basketball. We talked business strategy, bounced ideas off each other. And more importantly, Coach Vince was one of those guys that would go out and execute on ideas. I've been making a living doing basketball content for a while, and a lot of people come to me for advice and ask me what to do, and not many of them actually follow through on the advice that I give them. Coach Vince was a go-getter. He'd go make things happen for himself. One of the things that I'll always remember about Coach Vince is that he always made time for my calls when I reached out for him. I would call him, and he would be cooking dinner with two kids crawling all over him and juggling a million things, and he'd always pick up and make time for conversation. He taught me how to use voice memos. I never used voice memos before, and all of a sudden, Coach Vince got me to be a veteran of dropping voice memos for conversations. But we talked through a lot of projects. We solved a lot of problems together, and community really lost a good one. Coach Vince, I believe, was coaching a basketball game or at a basketball tournament when he had an emergency medical situation, and Vince passed away. We lost Vince. Anybody in the audience there, if you're watching this video now or you're watching the replay of it, consider supporting Vince's family. There's a link in the description here that you can click through if you go to the bio of this 101 Hoops Instagram page. And you can learn more about Vince, or if you've learned from Vince through his content online, that would be something that you could support here. So I'm going to pop up that GoFundMe real quick here and give people a look at that. And then we'll transition into our show, guys. So like I said, this is the place to support Coach Vince. I appreciate everybody in the basketball community who would consider doing this. But Coach Vince was a guy that loved talking basketball. He loved sharing ideas. He loved helping other coaches. And today we're going to do a little bit of that ourselves. So as hard as it is to transition from something like that, we're going to get into our first topic here today, guys. So the first topic that I wanted to talk to you about is star player standards and compromises. And what I wanted to look at for this is a video that Mike Jakacki had posted. And Coach Jakacki posted a video of James Harden's defense in the playoffs. So James Harden had some issues guarding against the New York Knicks. They kind of exploited his defense, and I don't want to necessarily have a conversation about James Harden's defense specifically, but I do want to talk about, as a coach, feeling like we're a bit handcuffed by our players, particularly players that we need to try to win basketball games here. So, Coach Kramer, I want to kick it to you here and not necessarily talk about Coach Harden's defense, but just some thoughts on how much freedom star players earn from us as coaches, and at what point does accommodating a star player start hurting the rest of the team?
Wow. I mean, that's a heavy first question. And, it's something that I believe like very firmly in, in my response to this. If you're compromising for your best player, you're compromising everybody. That's one of the things that I really believe in. And so, I guess one of the things that I would say is, if that's, and again, I'm not picking on James Harden because we have different opinions on some of that stuff, and the NBA is a different world, right? Because James Harden's making 10 times more than his coach is making. And I know a couple guys, Mike Dunleavy specifically, who coached in the NBA for 20 years, talked a little bit about this with these star type players and some of the different ways you got to handle them at the NBA level. At the high school level, I believe if you're compromising for your best player, then you might as well not have any standards for anybody. One of the first things that I believe in is establishing standards and expectations, and making sure that the top dog is following them exactly the way that I want them followed. I feel like that's the best way to create a culture where the expectations are not just followed but lived. And I've been in situations where, as a younger coach, there was some of that compromise, and they never worked out very well. Because what happens is, if you're compromising for one guy, you're really showing everybody that you're willing to compromise. It puts you in some sticky situations. And then even with that star player, if you've compromised, whatever it is, a defensive effort, something that he's doing off the floor, it's going to show up at the absolute worst possible time. In a game, or in a key situation off the floor where the guy makes a bad choice. To me, when I take over a program, and when I took over the Canton South program, I had a kid who was a high major athlete, and I write about this in my book. I also write about it in Rebuild. And the kid, he blew off a Saturday morning practice, claimed his alarm clock didn't work. Listen, I'm not debating that. That's not what I'm here to do. Maybe the alarm clock didn't work, but the bottom line is, he's our best player. We got a game in 5 days. And he didn't show up to the morning practice where we started to, really talk about specific game plan for that first game that I coached at that new school. So to me, right, that's my chance to prove that, I care more about the long-term good of the culture and long-term success than trying to win one basketball game. I suspended him for the game. It wasn't written in ink anywhere that that's what I was going to do, but I decided, this is a chance to make sure that everybody understands that what our expectation is, that, we show up to every practice, whether you're the best player in the program or whether you're the last guy on the JV bench. And, by suspending him for that game, it sent a message to the rest of the players and to the top dog that, hey, listen, you're a great athlete, but I would rather lose games right now than worry about who's going to show up to practice 10 games in, 12 games in, because I let you get away with that in game one. So I'm not a big believer in any compromise at the high school level. Again, I think there are extenuating circumstances at the NBA level where, this is the guy you've been given by your GM and we're paying him $30 million, work with him, right, until we trade him. But like at the high school level, we don't have that, right? So it's a chance to make an impact on the entire program, but, also to make an impact on that kid, because ultimately in life, whether he's playing a sport, or moving into the business world, or, playing Division I football like he did at the next level, you're not teaching him anything by showing him that he can do whatever he wants because he's the best player. And I just think you're setting a kid up for failure in life. And I think you're setting your program up for failure long-term by compromising and accommodating. that type of behavior. So, that was kind of a long answer but it's something that I really, really deeply believe in. And I think that, young coaches, especially taking over a program, you can't be afraid to make the tough decision, especially when it comes to your best athlete or your star player, whatever you want to call them. Because if you start doing that, you open yourself up and your program up for a lot of long-term problems.
Yeah, I think as coaches, we all like to say the standards are the standards. Everybody, they're all applied to everyone exactly equally. And if the last player in the program did the same thing that the star player did, that we need to win games, discipline would be applied in the exact same fashion. Sometimes it's a little more nuanced than that. Sometimes I think coaches come to the idea that they can rationalize different things to make it make sense in their head because they need to do certain things for their program. And we're looking at clips of defense, and I'm not specifically talking about defense. It could be a bad attitude. It could be a selfish play. It could be, an on-court outburst or something like that. But to say that we're all just going to cast our star player onto the streets if they don't follow our standards, I don't think most coaches actually are willing to do that. I think there's very few coaches that are actually willing to really just go toe-to-toe and battle. I've had situations where, one of the key players in our program, their parents were driving me crazy and they wanted to sub out our pet band and replace it with a DJ for games, even nonsensical things like that. And then you're in this position as a coach where do I try to accommodate? Do I try to massage what this family request is? Ultimately, we did not just ditch our pet band to bring the DJ in, but you're in all these kind of tricky situations where certainly in today's day and age of basketball, if you don't make people happy, they can just leave. They'll just trade schools. They'll just go free agent on you and they'll be at a new school the next year. But if you do make these concessions, then you're in a place where you're losing that credibility within your program. So, Coach Sim, do you think coaches stick to their guns and apply these standards completely equally to all players in their program, or do you think coaches do rationalize some of this behavior when it makes the most sense for the program to try to justify things in a certain way?
Yeah, it's a fine line. I tell you that much. Building relationships with each of your players is really important, whether they're your 14th man on the roster or your top man. And I think in this situation, it's all over the map. I think you'll have inexperienced coaches who don't develop those relationships with their students or kids or whichever, and struggle. It's a struggle one way or another in this day and age. I think the relationship building is the most important piece. If you can find a way to touch base, find out a little bit about that star player, and in this day and age, we have film. We have a lot of film to work with, and often if you maybe work at the high school level, work with the parents, work with your player, show some film, discuss what the issues are, I think you can get away. And then ultimately, if playing time is important and you start limiting that when these certain things, a player is selfish, you got to pull them off, have a quick discussion, and maybe, look at that. That's kind of the way I see it. But I think it's all over the map. To answer your question there, Matt, there's coaches who honor their standards, and then there's others who will bend for their star players. And I'm with you, Coach Kramer. You just can't. I think you have to the word isn't fair, but you have to uphold your team standards. And I think that applies across the board.
You make some great points there. I think the key word here that we need to avoid is being punitive, right? I mean, to me, it's not about punishing. It's about leadership. It's about mentoring, right? In the situation that I already mentioned, I didn't yell and scream at the kid. It was a very calm conversation. I let him have his moment. I let him tell me what it was about. But I had already made up my mind before the conversation happened that if there's going to be long-term good in this program, guys got to show up to practice. right? And I mean, if my best player doesn't feel like he has to show up to a Saturday morning walkthrough because we scrimmaged late last night and didn't get back, blah blah blah, then why wouldn't some of my other starters say, well, Gerald didn't have to do that, so why should I have to? I'm gonna miss his practice, and if I only hold him out of the starting lineup, that means he doesn't get his name called for the starting lineup, and then he's in the game. I mean, a kid who's been playing can live with that. That's no big deal. I feel like here's the way I would boil this down. Every single time I've made the tough decision, every single time I've addressed the tough decision, right? Had a conversation with the kids, said, here's what we're going to do. Explain the why, let them talk, right? And then at the end say, this is what we're going to do. Every single time I've made that tough decision, it's worked out well immediately and long-term. Anytime I've ignored it, right? And that didn't happen at all after my first 4 or 5 years. Anytime I tried to rationalize, I know the play was, we're working on situational basketball, and the play was to go to Dean on the wing. But he thought that he'd go ahead and just isolate and go one-on-one, and he's a pretty good player, so he took that shot. Anytime I ignored that, it came back at the absolute worst possible time. Anytime that's happened. So to me, I'd rather make the tough decision and have 15 hard minutes, of face-to-face and a real talk with a kid that gives them a chance to grow as a person and understand what it's going to take to be successful in life, than to ignore it to try to win a basketball game, right? I mean, to me, it's not fun. It's not a part you look forward to. It's not something that you would call one of the glory parts of the job, and it sucks, especially once you've built a relationship with a kid, to have to hand down some kind of a consequence that is going to be painful for the kid and for the team in the short term. But it's just something that has to happen if you're going to be successful and you're going to stay someplace long term and really have kids living the standards that you lay out there for them.
Sim, you kind of summed it up really well in terms of you've got to do some difficult things as a coach, and the more transformational that relationship is, as opposed to it being a transactional relationship, the easier it is to make those difficult decisions where the kids understand that you're trying to do what's best for them with the decisions that you make, and not necessarily doing those punitive things like what Coach Kramer was talking about. With that, coaches, I wanted to transition into our second topic, which I posted a reel recently about a BLOB concept that came up in my studies of basketball here. And I'm calling this Swirl, and it's a concept that shows up amongst a lot of different high-profile coaches. And what we're looking at here is a concept where we've got 2 screeners and 2 cutters, and typically we're making some kind of circular pattern around the screeners. And the alignment changes from team to team, and even the same team will use different alignments. But the concept really stays the same, where we're using a circular pattern with the freedom to back cut at any time. And we really force the screeners to play these circular cuts in an honest fashion, because when they try to help, they try to hedge, they try to switch, we've created some space here to slip to the basket. So I just thought this was such a interesting BLOB concept. And I think it's one where when we as coaches think about our BLOB packages, we think about, okay, we're going to start everything from the same alignment to kind of disguise what we're running to the defense. And this play, you could start it from different alignments. You could start it from about any alignment. But the freedom and flexibility of the concept creates that disguise more than the alignment does, where the players have freedom to cut in different ways and back cut at any time. So, Coach Sim, when you saw this Swirl BLOB concept, what was your first reaction to it?
Well, first of all, I really like the name. Secondly, I think another great name for this would be the blender. I mean, it's an awesome play in terms of for teaching at the high school level. You got screening action, you have cuts, you got slips, and I I love plays where it's conceptual based and you keep the same concepts in different alignments. And I think this offers that ability. And, sometimes you can switch out at the high school level or even youth level. It's excellent to teach them the different parts, whether to be a screener or a cutter and so forth. So yeah, I really like it. And when I think of the blender, I think you're using all 5 people, and when they do their spins and cuts and screens, what's going to come out is usually an open player at the basket. So yeah, I really like it.
Coach Kramer, I would consider this a relatively simple blob. Do you think simple blobs tend to outperform more complicated blobs over time?
I mean, most of mine were simple. We've talked about, actions a lot, coach, in different settings. Sometimes when we're setting up something for a product, sometimes when we're just doing one of these, I believe anytime you have a formation or a deployment, whatever you want to call that, and there are multiple outcomes and different counters that you can run out of the same look, to me, the simplicity wins the day. Right? I mean, we had a baseline out of bounds play that we'd run it over and over and over again. The whole world knew it was coming, and there was so many different possibilities to it, similar to something like this, that we would get something a little different out of it every single time. And then we'd also have a counter or two that that we had attached to it that we would use in key moments. Right? They've seen it 2 or 3 times in a game. Now we run the counter to it, the run it or the again action. And, it ends up with something totally different that turns into a layup. I really like the whole swirl concept. I've used some of that, not from baseline out of bounds, but actually from the top, where you're swirling around, staggered screens or double screens. And, again, one of the things that we talk about is that, so often it's the screeners that become the guys that they get the best shots on these plays, because especially when you've got a big time shooter or scorer coming around that action, whether it be the first guy or the second guy, the guys that are defending the screeners are going to be taught to show and help with that screening action. And what happens is you turn an offensive player on your team that's maybe not real skilled into a viable threat to score by putting him in that screening action. So yeah, there's a lot to like about what's going on here.
Yeah, what makes baseline out of bounds plays really difficult to guard is the passing angle that you have. You're passing the ball from underneath the basket, so you have this direct line to the rim, where if you can get somebody open at the rim, you can get probably the most high efficiency shot available, a layup or a dunk for your team. So you really want to capitalize on these baseline situations, because you can't, in your half court offense, simply make one pass directly to the rim for a layup. So, Coach Sim, my question to you is, how many baseline out of bounds plays do you think it's appropriate for a team to carry? And also, how often do you think you should refresh your baseline out of bounds package? Should you have a package in and run it for the whole year? Should you be adding as you go? Should you be changing plays in and out? What are your thoughts there? We've lost Coach Sim's audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a great question. I think I just recently changed my philosophy on this, where I would have run about 3 or 4 different sets. I've switched to one basic set that changes depending on what the team reads, and keep one in the back pocket for the end of a game situation where they haven't seen that blob or baseline out of bounds play. One thing that you mentioned is the angles. And another thing that's tough about to defend a blob is, often the defensive players' backs are to the ball. So you can, depending on the player's cuts and how they move, they can go left, right, up, back, and create, get their back to the ball. So their eyes are lost on the ball in the pass. So yeah, I kind of kept it simple and go with one for the majority of the season. And I always have one in the back pocket. We consistently practice. And if we need something a little different near the end of the game, we pull out that one. And I think, that's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, I've used usually a package of 3 or 4 baseline out of bounds plays as our normal amount of plays. And usually we would have some kind of clock dictation on what we were going to run that I could override on the sideline if I wanted to. But basically, it could be an odd, even, 0 package where I've done, if the last number on the clock is an odd number, we run our odd play. If it's an even number, we run our even play. If it's 0, we would run our 0 play. I've also done things where I've had 5 plays and like numbers 1 and 2 were a play, numbers 3 and 4 were a play, 5 and 6 were a play, 7 and 8, 9 and 0 were a play, where we'd have 5 plays. Again, we're just reading the last number on the clock for what we're going to run. I could see with something like this, where you might just carry this as your only baseline out of bounds play, and you could run it from multiple alignments, and it would be effective in these situations because you have the freedom to make these back cuts and to cut in different directions and to slip the screens, where you really only have one play, but it might even look like you have 5 or 6 different plays. Coach Kramer, in terms of a special situations package for baseline out of bounds, what do you think that looks like in your head, with the combination of things that you practice and the things that you might even try to just run on the fly out of a timeout in a unique situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in late game situations, and I'm a big believer in having a couple actions from the baseline out of bounds and the sideline out of bounds. I actually prefer to be sideline out of bounds at the end of a game. When you come across and you take the timeout, I got a couple of things I really like to do from there that have been supremely successful for the teams that I've coached. We've had some great success with them, but also to have a couple from baseline out of bounds that I don't run at any other time. Like they're in the package, and one of them is very late clock. Let's say 0.7, 0.3 to 0.7 seconds. We got to have something, right? Especially if we don't have a timeout that we've practiced, where we give ourselves a reasonable chance to get a shot off. And so like that play would be only for that particular situation. And again, with any really good play, there's more than one way that it ends, right? Like if they take the first thing away, then there's a secondary option that you get down to that late clock, and as much as we'd like to say we're going to get the shot we want, the exact shot, getting a shot up is the most important thing. So you've got the first movement that's going to get you the exact shot you want, a second one that is going to get you like a shot that you still feel pretty comfortable with, and then even a third option. Because how many times do you see at the end of a game where a team's got the ball in that situation, they don't even get a shot up? To me, that's the worst possible ending, right? No chance to win the game. As far as the out of bounds plays go that we would run within the framework of a game, I'd like to design out of bounds plays the same as I design any other action with families. So we've got one option, one look that we run out of a line, and the play would just be called line. Same exact look, same exact alignment. I call line again. The word again triggers a different action, and then we have a line run it that goes off of it. That would be a third counter or a second counter to that base option, and that's kind of the way that that I like to roll with it. If you have 2 of those, you've really got 6 plays, right? Plus your out of bounds package for late in the game. I think if you've got that, and again, then you get into the IQ, your basketball team. I talk about this with coaches a lot. What your guys can handle, right? I mean, I've had teams that can handle a lot of different counters and a lot of tactics, and I've had other pretty good teams that just didn't function that way. So you only give them what they can handle. It doesn't do you any good at all to have 10 plays if they're not good at any of them. I would way rather have one family that they're really, really good at, and I know they can execute at a high level, than have 10 plays that we might not execute any of them very well. So, just some things to think about when you're building your out of bounds plays. And again, like I always say, let your players be, let your players show you. All right. And as a coach, kind of adjust to them and don't give them more than they can handle.
Yeah, I've been really intrigued by that Swirl blob, and I've uncovered some fascinating topics in these kind of deep dive film studies that I've been doing lately. And the next one is a zone offense concept that is called Rover. I ran an offense for years that I called zone motion, which followed this kind of Rover concept of zone offense. But basically what I found in this film study was some some different teams that were using a revolving middle as their zone offense. So we see Creighton, we see Baylor in the film that we're watching here. And basically what they're doing is they are sending different players in and out of the middle of the zone. So, Coach Kramer, I wanted to start with you here and just talk about how you've seen movement against the zone evolve through your coaching career.
Yeah, that's a great question. You go to the old head because he's seen it all, right? When I first started to coach, and again, I worked for great coaches. I say his name every time we talk. Henry Cobb, I thought was as good a high school basketball coach as there's ever been walking on this planet. And I think that highly of him. But our zone offense at that time was very rudimentary, and most zone offenses were. When a team went 2-3, what you get typically is a point offense with 2 wings and 2 in the post and pretty predictable movement on the interior of that zone. If you talk to a great zone defense coach, and I had a chance through the recruitment of one of my players to talk to Jim Boeheim when he was at Syracuse, probably the greatest zone defensive coach arguably of all time. And one of the things I asked him was, why zone with all those athletes? And he said, listen, man, people are running 1,000 things against a man-to-man, but I know when I go zone, we know where they're going to stand. I know who's going to be, I know where they're going to move, and we know exactly what shot we're willing to give up. And most teams don't have a lot of different things they run against the zone. It's just easier to prepare for. So I think that the evolution of zone offense has kind of, come from that idea. Back in the day when somebody went zone, offensive teams tended to stand. And, what you're seeing here in these clips is a lot of movement. And, one of the things that I would say with this is a John Beilein thing. And I back when Coach Beilein was at West Virginia the first time, I heard him talk a little bit about his own offense, and he was one of the first people to do this sort of thing. It's exactly what he was doing. And I talk about Beilein a lot because I had a chance to get to know him a little bit too. And I think he's one of the great offensive tacticians that the college game has ever seen, both against the zone and against the man-to-man. And to me, and I learned this young in my career because I coached in a gym with Henry Cobb, and he was a master at teaching a 1-2-2 matchup zone. If we stand against that, we will never get an open shot. The best we could possibly hope for is a contested 3. And again, now I got JV players when I'm first coaching against his varsity guys every day. So I started to play around with movement against zones and screening against zones maybe before other people did. And it wasn't because I was some kind of a genius. It was just because I was sick and tired of watching, my guys standing still and never getting a shot off in a practice. But again, against a zone, right? Deployment, the way you deploy is a start. But I think it's very important to cut through it. I think it's very important to overload it, and I think it's very important to screen it. And I think if you're not doing all 3 of those things, a really good zone will bog you down and paralyze your offense, and really turn you into a team that is one-dimensional, which is catch and shoot contested 3s. Yeah,
I wanted to flip it to you, Coach Sim, and just talk about attacking the middle of the zone. As a coach, is that something, when you're seeing a team going zone against you, is that one of your first thoughts is, how do we get the ball to the middle, and who do we want to have the ball in the middle of the zone? Or are you thinking in different terms?
No, I totally think it's important that we attack the middle. And from my perspective, we call something like this fish hook, where we play a 4 out, 1 in, where kind of 4 guard type players would be attacking the middle, jumping in and coming out, but they would fish hook. So come in, turn, look, and see if they can get a pass. I think 5 years back, we didn't see as much zone in high school basketball, and now we're starting to see more, especially the 2-3. So it's really important to, if you got a couple shooters, you got to find different areas of the floor that they got to get open in. And this type of motion, what we call fish hook, where the passer dives in and takes a look from the middle and then pops out, gives them different options to find those shooters. And the guy in the bottom kind of going back and forth in the 4-and-1 also gives that opportunity to get behind his defender, X5 or whatever you want to call him, and maybe get the ball on that short pass. So it's really important, I think, to get the ball into the middle, get the man into the middle as well. So it might get X5 to creep up out of the back of the zone. So it opens up your, I will call him your post player that's hovering around the baseline.
Yeah, I wanted to stay on the same topic here, but digress a little bit on how I've kind of seen the evolution of zone offense grow and what I think kind of brought about this. But Coach Kramer, you had mentioned, a lot of times when coaches go zone, you'll see an offense like this where we've got a point, we've got two wings, we've got a high post, a low post, and we've got a primary high post where we stick one player in the middle of the zone and they stay there. And there's advantages to that and there's disadvantages to that. On the perimeter, you might have all three players just staying stationary, or you might have some kind of exchange or interchange on the backside like we're looking at on the diagram now. But I think a lot of coaches have used this very successfully. What this allows you to do is get the ball to the middle to a player that you want to have the ball in the middle of the zone. So in the diagram we're looking at now, that's 5. It doesn't have to be 5. I've put my point guard in the middle against the zone at times, but you can put the player that's most comfortable attacking the zone in the middle, and particularly against the 2-3, usually you want a good decision maker that can, make a 15-foot shot in the middle of the zone, and that'll be able to compromise the zone, collapse the zone, and make decisions from the middle of the zone where you can generate pretty good offense from there. So this is kind of the starting point, but I think a lot of coaches have used this and they'll say, I want more movement. My guys just standing around, and they might do something like add a guard interchange. But typically the next progression of this is like, how do I keep this same structure but add a little bit more? So the next kind of evolution was a concept that I call power, where basically you're doing the same kind of thing where you have your 3 players on the perimeter, a point and 2 wings, and you have your 2 posts. But instead of standing one post at the high post and one post at the low post, you're making this kind of X cut where you follow the ball and you're flashing in and out of the middle of the zone. And there's some benefits to this where you're flashing from outside of the shell of the zone into the heart of the shell of the zone, which is harder for the defense to keep track of. But again, now we have 2 players kind of filling that high post role against zone, where if you have one player that's a lot better at making decisions or making a 15-foot jump shot or just has general comfort in the middle of the zone, now you're dividing up those touches between 2 different players. So I think a natural progression is we're going to stand somebody in the middle and they're just going to stay there. The defense can kind of trade that player off, pass that player off. It's harder to get the ball in there, but once you get it in there, it's to a player that you're really comfortable having the ball there. Progressing to something like this where you're starting to rotate 2 different posts into the high posts and low posts. And from here, the next progression I think coaches come to, it's like, well, now I've got some movement in my zone. I like this power concept, but I don't necessarily want my big guys constantly handling the ball in the middle. So they would transition to kind of something like this, where this is this triangle continuity where you're rotating different players on each pass. You've got a baseline player that has kind of freedom to roam the baseline and keep the back line of the zone offense honest. But you're rotating different players in and out of the middle of the zone, but you're not just reliant on your post players flashing in and out of there. So this progression that I'm talking about isn't necessarily through the course of a season or something like that. This is generally how I think coaches think about zone, where they probably start with that gaps concept. They want a little bit more movement. They are exploring different ways throughout their coaching career on how to get more movement. And from a concept like this, where you're rotating different players through the middle in a continuity pattern, you're using your guards to catch the ball in the middle, we would get to what we're looking at now, which is kind of this rover or fish hook concept, where we're constantly just rotating different players in, and it might be a pass, cut, and fill, or you might be able to flash from the backside. But rover, as I just define it in zone offense, is just any of this kind of revolving middle where you're flashing in and out of the middle with different players. So there's pros and cons to doing it a different way. At some point, more movement actually kind of negates the effectiveness of the attack. But Coach Kramer, I'm interested in your coaching career, how much of this progression, as I've described it, did you get through? Did you skip a couple steps, or were you looking for solutions your whole coaching career and finding yourself in one place or another in that progression?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I would say what you just did, Matt, was probably what I did as a JV coach when I was coaching under Henry Cobb at Canton South. We had and I can tell you the calls still. I remember back in the day, right? Our zone offense was called red, and it was gaps. I mean, it was 0.2 wings and 2 in the post. We didn't stand a guy in a high post. We used the interchange, flash high, flash low, short corner, all that stuff with the 4 and 5. But the 1, 2, and 3 were generally pretty stationary. We had some bigs back then that were pretty good players, and that helped. But I mean, that's kind of what we did, and then you start to play around with it, just like you said. Right now, let's interchange the guards, or maybe step the backside wing in, and when the ball's passed to the left, set a flare screen for the point guard to interchange, and doing some simple things like that. And then, right, okay, I'm coaching against Henry's 1-2-2. One of the things that they're matched up with you. So like if you're going to stand, they're going to stand, and you're never going to get a shot. So now let's overload, right? Let's pass from right wing to point, and when the right wing passes it back to point, he drags the baseline and overloads the ball side corner. So that the defense has to play an overload. And so, little things became calls. We called that baseline drag and overload a gold cut. Eventually, the varsity team liked that. We started to use some of the things that we were doing tactically in practice against the varsity as a JV team. We started to use it at the varsity level because the varsity was struggling to guard it. And, an offense kind of evolved, with some different things in it, some cuts and some overloads, not much screening. When I became a head coach, I went back to we ran a high school offense, Matt, and I don't do anything else offensively from my high school days except for this. But at Hoban High School, we had a 4-out offense that was continuity, where the ball side was where there was a heavy side and a weak side, so it'd be a point, kind of a 1-3-1 alignment if you're visualizing this. A point, 2 wings, a guy in the high post to start, and a guy on the baseline on the heavy side. And there was some continuity in that, where we get some cutters going through it, and the ball would change sides, so the heavy side would flip from left to right on a ball reversal. And then there's some screening that we added to it. The next thing you know, we had our own zone offense that was highly effective because it was doing all those things. It was utilizing the high post with a couple different players. It was cutting through, and then we had a couple wrinkles where we would screen the baseline defender. There was a backdoor lob, and at your store, my gutting a zone offense has probably been maybe my second most popular item there, because it does go through that entire Hoban zone package. And it also has 3 or 4 set plays that we run quick hitters out of that look, against multiple zones and things like that. So I think the word here, for me, coaching against the zone, and something that I really like to talk about, is been evolution, right? From the early days where people weren't doing much against the zone to now all of a sudden, having a package that kids were really good at running, a base offense, and then some things out of that that could add to what a defense has to defend. One of the things that I would say about a zone, and we having coached zones too, most coaches have. You coached 33 years, you probably tried a little bit of everything. How you teach the zone, right? So you have to come up with ways of it to know how to attack a zone. You have to understand what the zone's doing defensively. And if you've ever installed a zone or coached with a coach who did, you can see we teach this 2-3 zone by putting a guy in the point, putting 2 on the wings, putting 2 in the post, and those are the rotations. And if you don't do things to break from the normal things that zone defends, then you're going to struggle against zones. So I'm a big believer, in having something different. And, my gutting a zone item goes through all those things. And, again, I feel like the worst thing that can happen is, you get into a game and you're really good playing against man-to-man, but you've only got one thing you do against a zone. And if it's not working that night, then the team's going to paralyze your offense all night long, and it's going to be a struggle. So, and I like this, like the stuff you're showing me here. I like that Rover concept. Coach is calling it the fish hook cut. I really like that stuff. I think it's really good. And again, if you take a look at that zone defense, they're having to communicate. You can see it's making them uncomfortable, right? And I think anything you do to kind of distort a zone and make it do something that it wasn't designed to do, you've got good zone offense.
Yeah, Coach Sim, I wanted to flip it to you. And if we're in agreement that it is important to try to get the ball to the middle against a zone, how much do you value having the guy you want to have the ball in the middle of the zone versus the unpredictability of being able to probably get the ball to the middle a little bit easier by flashing different players in and out? So would you rather have easier catches in the middle with kind of a random assortment of players having those catches, or would you rather have the guy that you think is a zone problem solver catching the ball every time in there?
That's a great question. And from my point of view, when I teach this, we teach it as zip passes. The defense has to shift. And if you get the appropriate guys in different positions, the defense has to shift. And if you zip 2 or 3 passes in a row, the defense just can't move as fast as the ball does. And it's really important to move that ball quickly and efficiently. So yeah, to answer your question, different guys in the middle can work, but if you've got a power forward, having that option as well is important too. And my last team, I had a pretty big guy that could move the ball efficiently and actually take that shot. So we changed it up. So it depends on your personnel.
Yeah, that's a great point, Coach. And sometimes we start to talk, and I visualize certain nights that I've coached. Right, we played in 2018 when I was in Georgia against a school called Alatoona, and Alatoona was in a wide 2-3 zone. And I had a kid named Alex O'Connell, who I talk about quite a bit on here. He played at Duke. Right now he's playing professionally in Venice. He was actually with the New York Knicks last camp on an Exhibit 10 contract and played summer ball with them last year. Anyway, Alex was a great player in high school. He wasn't obviously what he is now at age 28, but he was a great player. And he liked to we'd like to set up on the wing. He was a wing, quote unquote. And Alatoona knew that, and they were wide on the top. My point guard wasn't a great shooter that year, and they really made it tough for Alex to get catches. Their whole defense was designed to keep him from getting, good touches, good looks, open shots on the wing. So, I mean, sometimes it's not that hard, right? We call a timeout. You know what, Alex, you're playing. We're still going to stay in Hoban, which is our base offensive concept, but you're going to play in the high post, right? But it changed everything, right? Now I got my 6'7" guard that's getting an easy catch in the middle of that defense because that defense was designed to fan out and make it tough on the wings. And all of a sudden, we go from not being able to get a good look at the basket to getting a whole bunch of good looks, right? Alex, catch, turn around 15-footer. Alex catch, isolated on X5 who comes up, drives to the basket, right? He gets them and one. Right now they pinch in on the sides. Alex, they're playing him. He gets a touch. They collapse on him. He kicks out. We get a corner 3. So, sometimes just a simple adjustment, putting the right guy in there and saying, you know what, normally we rotate through here. But like you were saying, Coach Hack, if I got, a guy in there that the defense doesn't really care if they catch it or not because they can't do anything with it, he's not really doing us much good. So that night, it wasn't tactical as far as, necessarily X's and O's and anything tricky. It was just like, let's put our dude in the high post if that's where they want to let us have the ball, and let's let our dude go to work in a different spot than he normally goes to work. And it's very effective, right? To kind of get a feel for that in game and know how to make that adjustment. People talk about in-game adjustments all the time, and they make it sound like it's rocket scientist, and it's really not, right? Hey, our best player is him. Let's put him in there where they don't have any defenders, and let's see what happens. And so sometimes it's just that simple.
Yeah, when I think about my coaching career, my time at St. Thomas Aquinas, I was more guard heavy. And I liked this Rover concept because I felt comfortable with a lot of guys handling the ball from the middle of the zone. And we also had Anthony Meglin, who was like dynamite at making decisions from the middle of the zone. And then when I went to Glenelg, we had a much more forward and post heavy team. And I looked at the roster and I decided I'm never going to have a lineup on the court where I have 4 guys that I'm comfortable with handling the ball and making decisions from the middle of the zone. So we went to something more stationary, which plays off the exact point that you made Coach Sim, which is a lot of this is personnel dependent, and you can't just force things down the throat of your team because you want to play basketball a certain way. You've got to, of course, look at your personnel and make decisions based on that. So, guys, with that, I kind of wanted to pivot into our next topic here, where we're talking a little bit about standards and rituals and culture. And I put out this piece of content on X. And what this is some of the rituals that I've used in my coaching career and the expectations and the standards. And, just to go through this real quick, we want kids to be on time and be prepared. We want them to be focused in their warm up. We want good body language. We use a whistle system where, players are expected to hear a whistle and respond to that, whether it's to get their attention or whether it's to come to the whistle and meet at the whistle. We expect players to kind of control their mistake response, and we would do that through using a clap system. Players to echo calls, and when we would use a command of get a touch, they would all do, a high five or some kind of physical contact with each other. We put in a rule of you owe 5 push-ups for every time you miss a layup or make a turnover in practice, and that wasn't something that the coaches were, on the players about. We weren't saying, now do your push-ups, you missed the layup. It was all player-to-player accountability, where the players typically would just take care of it themselves, but also it might take another player to remind them, hey, you owe push-ups, you made turnover on last possession. So this is just an example, but I wanted to facilitate a conversation about manufacturing culture. Coach Sim, do you think it's possible, or do you think it's necessary to manufacture a culture? In my opinion, at least you need to attempt to manufacture a culture with your programs. You can't just force them to do everything and think that that's going to be effective, but you need to give them some triggers on responding to the coaching staff and interacting with each other. What's your opinion on manufacturing a culture in your basketball teams?
Absolutely. So important, especially in this day and age when kids are more entitled these days, and they're given more from their parents. Their parents protect them more. Absolutely. I think from a coach's perspective, the season has to be planned behind this culture. In your first team meeting, in your first parent meeting, these things might have to be put up in writing in a PowerPoint and given to the parents, given to the kids. And even so far as when you're selecting goals, include your kids and your team to help pick them. What are the things that are important? What are the non-negotiables? Making sure that everybody's aware and they're part of that process. It comes back to what I said earlier. That's part of the relationship building with each other. When they're forced to sit in a room and talk amongst each other, which is not really common these days. Most of them have their phones in their hands and are uncomfortable. You put them in a little bit of a discomfort, and eventually they start to learn to accept that. And I think they like it. I think they like that structure, and they like those standards and culture that you put in place. And they become, as you said, the referees themselves. And I saw that this year where I really emphasized the culture, and it was actually planned, and it worked out quite well.
Yeah, we're looking at some of the standards and rituals that I've used. I've also always been big on, practice gear stays tucked in. We give eye contact to the coaches, to you, and that's kind of a check on the players to see how much they're invested and how much they really care in what we're doing. When you're talking to a player and the expectation is that they give you eye contact and their eyes are wandering, they could have a short attention span for maybe a time or two, but after a few reminders, they're making a conscious decision to not have eye contact with you. If the shirt tail comes untucked because they were just doing a war rebounding drill, obviously we're understanding about that. But when the player just walks onto the court with their shirt untucked and their shoes untied, they're making a conscious decision. So Coach Kramer, what do you think the difference is between a meaningful tradition and a gimmick tradition or ritual? And what's a ritual that you've used that's worked in your coaching career?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think every ritual is maybe going to feel a little bit gimmicky to kids until it becomes a part of their life, right? I think you guys, you both hit on some great points. Kids are different nowadays. If they're sitting in the locker room and they've got their cell phones, they're not talking to each other, right? It's the first, real generation of human beings that can be in a room with 10 other human beings and never speak to them. If you're, if you're being honest with yourself, right? They could be talking to somebody halfway around the world. Hey, somebody even from Canada, maybe even, right there in your locker room. And so I think that, that there needs to be definitely some rituals that you put in place. The one that I would talk about first and foremost with our practice culture is our partner lock-in shooting, where guys become accountable for each other, getting to the gym on time, walking on the floor. We always say walking on the practice floor with a plan and a purpose, right? I mean, like we're there with a focus and a purpose. And that partner lock-in shooting, the way that we had implemented that the last 15 years of my career, took care of practice culture, and kids getting there on time and not walking on the floor with their shoes untied and their shirts untucked and firing up half-court shots or joking around on the sideline. And that became a very authentic way and a very authentic ritual that kids embraced extremely quickly because it was something that benefited them. They were going to get a lot of shots up. So like that being one, but like also just things that you do off the floor. And I think Coach Sim hit on it a little bit earlier with, those authentic relationships. I think you need to do things off the floor with kids. And we have been doing this for years, right? Like my entire coaching career, because again, I had good mentors that showed me this, but like the time that we spent just at a cookout in my backyard, sitting around a campfire, right? Just talking, like people talk and interacting, authentically and, talking about things outside of basketball that, that build relationships, and you can get a feel for who a kid is. Like, what are they doing when they're not playing basketball? Right. Are they fishing? Are they, are they working? Are they family oriented? Do they go on vacation? I mean, like you can't replace some of that authentic stuff, but then all the things you talked about too, Coach Hack, with, the things that you would expect, body making contact with each other. One of the things that we started to do later on was, because I found when kids were doing the whole, the phone thing and they just weren't interacting and there wasn't a lot of physical contact. Listen, high fives and chest bumps amongst players are real bonding moments. And even if you're forcing those things at first, when it becomes second nature for them, right now, all of a sudden it becomes real. And so there is that initial kind of gimmicky aspect of it. Like we would do our dynamic stretching, then we would sit and stretch, and there'd be some music playing. I transitioned to this old head, started piping some music into the practice for pre-practice shooting and stretching, right? Then the music goes off and we know the stretching's over. And the deal was, you got to help somebody up off the floor. You got to chest bump two guys. You got to high five two guys. And, after you tell them to do that and it becomes second nature, now they're having fun with it and it becomes real. So I think, initially with a program, you've got to do some of those gimmicky things. And then the hope is that the kids start to learn them and live them. And then you don't have to say it anymore. So you've been there for 2 or 3 years. The seniors do it. The younger kids see it. And you never had to tell the younger kids because it's part of your culture and your expectations. And so, those are some of the things that, that I kind of grabbed off you. I think, Matt, you do a great job with that stuff. I mean, like I sit and I look at those things and I think I like that. I've thought of this, but I've never thought of that. One of the big things too in practice is if a guy takes a charge or he dives on the floor for a loose ball, whoever is in his group should be running over to him to try to pick him up off the floor. And we teach our guys, that dove on the floor, took the charge, don't even think about getting up until you see 2 hands that are ready to help you up. And again, you have to tell kids that at first, and it's a little thing and it seems kind of corny or gimmicky until you see it become a real thing, right? Now, all of a sudden it's important, and it's something that not just sheds a great feeling in your locker room, but it also things the people on the outside see. They're like, wow, that group is really together, man. They really believe in each other. They are connected. And I think anything that connects your players and your coaches together and sheds a positive life on your program is no longer gimmicky. I think it's become real.
Yeah, Coach Sim,
I'd just like to add one thing, and it's such a simple thing, and that is teaching gratitude. In this day and age, it's something that's really important. And one little gimmicky thing I've done every practice is when we meet at the end and we do our little cheer. You tell the kids, thank your coaches and thank each other.
Yeah.
And it's something I put on a PowerPoint with their parents as well, is parents, please make sure your kids are thanking their coaches and the people around them, their teachers. So gratitude is really important in this piece.
Yeah, I think Coach Kramer, you really touched on something important there. And it's like when you're starting these different culture initiatives with your team, you know, you've kind of got to be the driving force with it. But over time, when you get your program to a point where it's player to player passed on, it's even better. You know, I remember Nick Saban talking about the Alabama culture, and it's certainly impactful if Nick Saban is the one putting a culture initiative in and telling the players what to do. But when Julio Jones is telling the other wide receivers, that's not how we do things around here, that's when your culture is really humming there. So,
absolutely.
Yep, I wanted to transition here a little bit. We're going to get into the philosophy of using backdoor plays. So I've got a reel lined up here, and I've got Coach Sam Daly from X, who I've been following his work a little bit here. And Coach Daly posts these reels where he'll post different blob packages or different ATO quick hitters. But what he posted that I'd like to show is this reel of 25 different backdoor actions. And I don't necessarily want to have a conversation looking at the different backdoor plays, but I wanted to get into a little bit of just the philosophy of how you would work a playbook in terms of incorporating backdoor actions. So do you think, Coach Kramer, that teams are punished accordingly with backdoor plays based on their pressure or based on the scouting report? Or do you think that's appropriate this day and age, or do you think that there's more opportunity for coaches?
I think it's both, Matt. I mean, I think that if a team is an over-denying, really aggressive team that's going to try to deny wing entry and things like that, I think you'll have an opportunity to maybe score as many as 6 to 7 baskets in a game, punishing that type of defense. I also believe that if you're playing against a team that doesn't do that if you are tactically sound and you've designed what I like to call a set series or set family, that there's still 3 or 4 of those to get in the course of a game, even against a team that doesn't do that. I like the blind pig stuff that we've talked about. Obviously that Coach Self at Kansas has been really good at. I have some of that in my offensive stuff, but I also like the spin back, sucker, bait and hook backdoor plays that I in my man-to-man playbook, which, can be smaller or larger depending on how long I've been someplace. And again, the aptitude of my players for it. With every single set play we run, we've got 2 counters. One we call again. Okay, so like if I say we're going to run play one again, it's a counter, and then our run it is always a backdoor counter. We're going to have 4 or 5 of those going into every single game. And I think that regardless of what the defense is doing, you're showing some really good ones here. As I look up at those, there are opportunities if you're really paying attention to being a good tactical offensive coach to set those up, regardless of what type of man-to-man defense you're playing against. And I would even say as far as to have run-its against the zone, and our run-its against the zone are typically lobs over the top. So, to me, you can spend an entire game setting up a defense for 1 or 2 or 3 of these back doors. And we always signal that back door with the words "run it" after whatever play that we're running, and our guys know that means that we all believe that this defense is ripe to get hit with the back door. And when I tell my guys that, I teach that very, very, very specifically, and I tell them when you hear the word "run it" right after the play, we believe we're going to shoot the layup here, so expect the layup to be open, right? And I will say in a high school game, when you've got those and your players are really good at them and the timing is really good, and it does take time to work on them in practice, and the skills have been built, the pass, all the things that you've got a chance to steal 6 to 8 points at least in every game, maybe more against a more aggressive defense.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there, Coach Kramer, which is, we're looking at a reel of a lot of different backdoor set plays, and all of these plays are great, but you certainly don't want to have just a package of backdoor plays that are completely random. And when you can tie your backdoor concepts into the philosophy of your offense, where you're kind of setting up your backdoor plays all game long, because the things that you run are the backdoor plays are a counter to the things that you're already running. So, Coach Sim, I'm going to flip it to you, and I want to talk a little bit about what do you think are the key teaching points or details that make an effective backdoor cutter?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way I would teach this is you're teaching your players that they're the two people who are in essence going to make that pass. That if the player's playing up and over the line or too aggressive, obviously you back cut. But if they sag, then you might go into a dribble handoff or something like that. So it's different reads, and I think that's the most important part, is that you're giving the players the freedom to make different reads, and it can be anywhere around the floor, right? So yeah, that's kind of the way I see it, is teaching them that if the person's up the line and aggressive, back cut hard. And as Coach Kramer said, the timing is really important. So this has to be practiced, practice consistently. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, no, you hit on some things. I'm watching the clips, Coach, and you asked a great question at the beginning. Does it have to be an overly aggressive defense? There's been a couple times here where there's been almost no window to throw that into. The defense is sagging off on the weak side, and especially on these pivot or kind of spin back, back doors. It doesn't matter how many times you tell a kid defensively, don't jump into that passing lane. When that guy spins back, it's human nature, right, for that defender to step up a little closer, and all it takes is one false half step in the wrong direction by that defender, and a 6-foot window to feed that pass in. And once you get your guys used to the passer, especially seeing, wow, you know what I mean? Because I always tell my guys, listen, don't expect for the guy to fall on the floor, the defender, and for him to be the only. Listen, if our offensive guy can get his head and shoulders past that defender, throw it out there. He'll catch it, right? And then you got to work on catching it and finishing it and all that other stuff. But there's been a number of these in this video where there hasn't been much of a window. That was a pretty big window there, right? But it's over and over and over. It's the timing. It's the confidence in the play. It's the confidence that the offensive passer has in making that pass into that window. And it's the confidence you have to have. The passer has to have the confidence that the offensive player making the cut's going to catch it and finish, right? Because there's nothing worse than running that cut and watching the ball bounce off the guy's hands and out of bounds. So again, and I think Coach Sim, you hit it. It takes practice, it takes patience, but man, this is some practice time here that's got some real value to you in a game, especially if you're one of those teams that that you've got a chance to do something big, right? And that there's some teams that you're going to have to beat that are really good defensively. These are 6 to 8 points that you're going to steal, and you don't have to have a big guy, and you don't have to really have a skilled guy to do it. Right? It could really be any two guys. So I love these, man. This is one of the things I miss about coaching. And I've always said, if you've got a good man-to-man set, I don't care whether you're running out of a 2-guard front, a 1-guard front, whatever, there is a way to turn it into a backdoor play. So I would challenge every coach who's out there and, they like to be an offensive tactician. Look at every play you're running and see how you can turn it into one of these, because there's a way. In almost every situation, there's a way.
Yeah, Coach Sim talked about, kind of read and react backdoors, where in a conceptual offense, you're teaching players how to play. You're not scripting offense as much as what we're seeing on this reel right here, where it's more about what's the defense doing and how do we take advantage of the defense, where you're putting that defender on a read line, and then the defender can just, the offensive player can just decide if he's up the line, I'm going backdoor. If he's not up the line, I can take that handoff. But I would say from a passing standpoint, I love when I'm seeing in these clips where there's a lot of these fake passes where you're baiting that defender out into the passing lane just a little bit more. And Coach Kramer, you had talked about it where, you know, if it's a hard denial type of defense that's really geared towards taking offense or taking you out of your offense, you might not need a fake pass to get them out. They'll probably already just be there. But a lot of gap or deny teams that don't deny quite as hard, you can really bait them into the passing lanes just based on, like what you said, human nature. I think for a cutter, you're looking for a lot of change of pace. You're looking for a lot of change of direction quickly. I think you want to call for the ball. I think you want to show a hand, so to make that defender think that you're coming to meet the pass. But I think a lot of the smaller details are really what matters in these backdoor sets. And obviously timing is key, where the passer ready to deliver the pass when it's appropriate. Go ahead, Coach.
We always say two things: timing and sale. You got to sell it, right? I mean, if you're standing over there and you kind of, your shoulders are slouched and you're staring at the play, you're not baiting that guy. You hit the nail on the head. We get your outside hand up, call for the ball, make your defender believe that the ball's coming to you. It's all part of it, right? Those are little things, that become big things. And then, right, we always tell our guys, when you make the backdoor cut, don't stop the cut because you don't think you're going to get the ball. Carry the cut out all the way through. And then the next thing to that play, Matt, is, and I've got some, things that we've talked about, some of the items that I've shared on the store. You have to have a way to continue the action if you don't get the backdoor play, right? So perpetuating that play and having a next thing that we're going to do, a way to solve the problem of not getting the backdoor, because the last thing we want to do is not hit the backdoor and have to reset the play, right? We want to get into the next movement right out of that, whatever that might look like. And I think that's another really important part to being an offensive tactician. Understand that no matter how well your play is designed and no matter how good you are at it, scouting reports, or sometimes just really good defense will take away that first wave of what you want. So now, right, look at what's left on the floor and teach your guys what to immediately go back into so you can continue to relentlessly attack the defense. We always talk about, whether we're in transition or in our half-court offense, relentlessly attacking. Don't let the defense breathe, kind of reset, refocus, load up, and get ready to guard the next action, make the next action seamless.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. I enjoyed that conversation about backdoor philosophy. I wanted to pivot for our last segment of the day here and look at a zone offense set play from Coach Tom Izzo. And I don't know many coaches out there that haven't stolen at least something from Coach Izzo, whether it's his backdoor plays where he's got that, like we just saw in the reel, where you're hitting the elbow and then sending your wing back door. His chess series is as a man-to-man offense. But this line overload, I just found so interesting. And I'm going to cue up a film reel here in just a second. But this is in this stretch, seal, and dive zone offense family that I talk about so much, where if you look at the diagram here right now, we're running a quick hitter out of a line. But our 3 is going to sprint to that corner to stretch the zone wide, and that forces kind of X3 to account for that player. So you'd want 3 to be a shooter. Your 5 in this diagram is going to seal the zone in, and then your 4 here dive into that pocket of space that's created after we've stretched and sealed the zone. And ultimately what we're looking for here is to try to get the zone to be guarding air. So X4 with some good awareness might rotate over, and I think we'll see that in some of these clips. But a lot of times X4 is stuck on an island and they are not participating in team defense. They are guarding no one. So I'm going to cue up this reel of this line overload from Coach Izzo. Coach Kramer, what stands out to you the most about this line overload quick hitter from Coach Izzo?
I mean, you're attacking X5 in the middle of that zone who feels like he's probably protected from being attacked in there, right? I mean, that's number one. And that the Kansas play with the ball screen and the crack screen on the baseline is very similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see some similarities. I've never run this. If I can find 10 kids over in the park when I'm walking my dog today, they're going to run this on the playground court, because I feel like I want to teach this like right now, right? I've never done that before like that, but I love that. I mean, to me, you start screening X5 in there, and that's essentially what's happening. And it's what we were talking about earlier, that it's an overload situation as well. And look what X4 is doing on the other side of the floor. He's doing nothing, right? Unless the defense is really, really well coached and that's extremely well scouted, you're going to get something out of this every single time. You can see the defense adjust there and give up the open three. I mean, they've gotten a little something different out of this every single time. And like, I just love the way it attacks X5. I think so often with certain zone offenses, the backline guys get away with murder. Like they can get away with guarding air because the ball spends so much time above the foul line extended area. And I think that this puts a ton of pressure on, you know, guys to help across, guys to help back. That's a great play. Like I said, if there's 10 kids in the park, they're running this today. I'm gonna put it. I might even film it, right? But that's great stuff, man. I would, if it was me, if I had a team right now, this would be in the playbook tomorrow morning, just because it's fun, right? Just because it's fun, and you're going to get layups, and that's the other thing with this stuff, right? The teams go to a zone, they think they're going to turn you into a 3-point shooting team. Run this the second time or the first time down the floor against the zone, and just establish the fact that that's fine. You guys go zone. We're not going to turn into a three-point shooting, contest 3-point shooting, standstill team. We're going to beat you up on the inside here. And it's just beautiful stuff. I mean, Izzo's got some great stuff. He doesn't need us to sit and validate that, but like this is a thing of beauty here. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
One pass.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, Coach, where a lot of times when teams go zone, they want you to take outside shots. So when you have a quick hitter or two in your package that you can go to right away, as soon as you see zone and you can hit for a high efficiency shot, you can get something right at the rim. It really makes them second guess whether they even want to continue to play zone, because they're finding out more of that might be coming. Coach Sim, you know, we've got this kind of unique alignment. We're using a line. You might want to, if you were going to use a play out of a line, have some kind of counter to it. And I know Coach Izzo does have at least one counter to this line alignment. But how careful are you in thinking about your alignment in terms of the volume that you might be able to use a play? Because if you only have one play out of a line, how many times are you going to be able to run it and fool the same defense? You know, having something to disguise your alignment and a different action that starts out of the same alignment can be more effective. Talk to me about your thoughts on the alignment of your plays and how much usage you can get out of them.
Well, I think this is really interesting because I've never thought about stacking a zone like that, especially with 4 players. Whenever you get a shooter cutting to the corner and X5 getting pinned in there, I think you can run it many different times. The defense is confused. You've got X4, as Kramer said, sitting in the no man's land. And when you got 3 or 4 guys stacked, they can move a little bit different. Maybe that cut to the corner is a little bit more towards the wing and makes that defender have to choose between the top defender or the bottom defender. So I think you can continue to move this and just, as we said earlier, change where they cut and use the same alignment. So it's a possibility. It's brilliant. I mean, again, you're flattening the defense. You're flattening that zone and leaving a couple, I think 2 players out in no man's land on the back half or the weak side.
Yeah, I sat and talked, you know, again with the great Mike Dunleavy when he was at Tulane. He was recruiting one of my players and got to know him really well. And one of the things he said was anytime you can force the zone to help back, you're really, really hurting that zone. I mean, like look at the guard on the side away from the ball. He's about as worthless a defender as there's ever been. You know, he's not guarding anybody. He's not doing anything. Like if you're going to stop that, he would almost have to help back into the paint near the basket area to prevent some of this stuff from happening. See him on the backside; he's not doing anything. Yeah, this is just brilliant stuff. And then earlier, Coach Hack, you said, I always take notes when I'm writing. You're talking about, you know, from baseline out of bounds, it's like the one place where you can make one direct pass and end up with a layup. But like Izzo turned an out of bounds play into a play from the top against the zone. It's essentially an out of bounds play with the ball up top. And you're getting the same thing. You're getting a layup on the first pass out of a line, what would typically be an OB under alignment. And I've seen at least a half dozen times where there's been one pass directly to the guy at the basket for a layup. It's just good stuff.
And ultimately, if you know you want to pass it inside for that layup, but they'll start cheating, and maybe X3 will you know allow that pass to the corner, and now you got a 3-point shot and a lot of boys in rebounding position.
But that's actually what happened in the one, and it was several ago. I'm sitting there watching the clips where clearly the coach on the sideline said, hey, listen, just slough back in there and don't let that happen. And the guy in the corner caught the ball, and there was nobody there to guard him. In fact, like for a second, he was like, wait a minute. I got the ball here. We're playing a game, and there's nobody guarding me. He almost didn't know what to do with it. I think he took 2 dribbles in and took a 15-footer and made it. There's so much going on there. And again, you are really eliminating 2 defenders. And now all of a sudden it's 5-on-3, really, basically on this side of the floor. If those other guys don't step across and the top guy doesn't step back, that's as good as it gets right there. I've not seen that one until today. I probably have. I just didn't notice it because whatever I was doing. But like it's good stuff, really good stuff.
Yeah, I just appreciate Coach Izzo so much in this NIL age. There's been a lot of legendary coaches that have tapped out and said, I don't, want to keep doing this. Coach Izzo is still in there, and he's still competing at the highest level of the sport as things adapt and evolve. Even as an older coach, he's bringing great conversation pieces and high-level basketball teams. Guys, that's our 6 segments for the Roundtable. I want to thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your basketball insights. One final reminder, in the description of this video, you've got the Legacy Fund for Coach Vince Hanna. Please consider supporting Coach Hanna's family as they go through this tragedy that they're dealing with. But guys, that's going to wrap our show today. And I look forward to connecting up with both of you in the future and having you back on to talk some more basketball.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great meeting you, Coach Sim. And as always, Coach Hack, I learned a lot here today. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Hey, we'll talk soon.
All right.